Today we have with us William Laney, who knows this business of homelessness firsthand. And he's written a book, Homeless Isn't Hopeless. And we're very privileged to have him here with us today. And he's going to tell his story. So welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Lee. Thank you.
Really nice to have you here. So I think what we'll do is just let you tell your story. I'd say a précis of what you've written in your book. I read it cover to cover.
Did you? It was wonderful.
I find it extremely well written and a fascinating story.
Thank you.
So the BBC8 is yours.
Thank you very much. Probably the first place to start in discussing homelessness is, what is homelessness? What constitutes a homeless person? The United States Code defines homelessness. They define a homeless person as an individual who lacks a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. That's the official description, the official definition. In today's world, though, it goes a little bit broader than that, and most homeless advocates and also some government officials have broadened that to include some other areas. For example, we now include as homeless persons those who are doubling up. By doubling up, this is a family where perhaps the breadwinner or breadwinners have have lost their jobs, they're unemployed, and so they have trouble paying their rent. Eventually they lose their apartment or their home, and so they need a place to stay. They have to find a place to stay. Other than being on the street, perhaps the only thing they can do is to move in with a neighbor, more likely a family member, and then you have two families doubling up, in other words, living together. You may have a family with 2 or 3 children, excuse me, and they're doubling up with another family with 2 or 3 children, and you have a very, very tight quarters and a very difficult situation. Also today, and especially with the new Obama administration, we're looking at homelessness from the standpoint of prevention. And the monies coming out from the stimulus package that are directed toward homelessness are primarily aimed at prevention, as opposed to simply the cure. And here we should say that for most of us, homelessness there's a stereotype that is a little mistaken. A lot of people view homeless as those who are lying on the side of the curb, perhaps with a bottle in a brown bag, or are mentally ill. And more what we're doing is setting that aside, because those folks who are mentally ill and who have an addiction problem, they're going to be a problem regardless of whether there is homelessness or not. In other words, if we cure all the other aspects of homelessness, we will still have to pay attention and take care of these people. So setting them aside, we find that there is hope to end homelessness. My particular case, which a lot of people ask about, I came as part of the mortgage crisis a few years ago. I, at that time, was no longer in a condominium, but I did have an apartment. I was fairly well off because I was supplementing Social Security income with a very nice job. For a while, I was doing the gift coordinating for a timeshare company, handling the safe with all the monies and all the certificates. That company then filed bankruptcy, and I went to work doing a retail entrepreneurship over at the swap shop in Fort Lauderdale. But suddenly, without much warning, everything came down on me health-wise, which eliminated the ability to earn additional revenue, and I was left with only my Social Security income. And by things going wrong, I developed something called myelodysplasia, which is pre-leukemia, a bone marrow disease, developed glaucoma. I had to have 2 knees replaced. I had been in a wheelchair for about a month when I had them replaced. So the thought of additional income was gone. So I had to find my options. My first option, as with a lot of people who are today losing their jobs and their place to stay, My first option was to find another place less expensive. In South Florida, that's very, very difficult. I went through all the possibilities looking for rooms to rent and struck out. The next option was to find something more lucrative, an income that would provide the monies necessary for my place to live. That also was negated by the fact that I had the physical problems. I went through everything, and the last viable option I had to pass on, that would be to leave Fort Lauderdale, where I live, and go to a less expensive area. At that time, my mother was going into a nursing home, was under hospice care, so that was an impossible option. That was not an option that I could consider. So eventually, I took my place on a Greyhound bus, and for 16 months, that was home. And during that time, I came up with the idea to do the book, to write the book. And I found during the course of that time that there are really what I consider three types of homeless people. There are what I call the for sure homeless. Those are there we see on the streets, visible, easy to count. Then there are what I call the for now. The for now homeless are people who are in shelters. For the time being, they have some security. And then I have what is the vast majority of homeless people are those we cannot count and very seldom see and know as homeless, what I call the sort of homeless. These are people who live in their cars. These are people who sleep on a boat. These are people who have sort of a fixed place to go each night. They're sort of on a regular program, and you might even consider their conditions adequate, but nonetheless, they are homeless. So this is where we are with the homeless situation today, and a question often comes up to me, do you see any hope for the homeless condition? And I always say yes. Now that we have this tremendous economic crisis in the country, people say, well, that's the end of the hope for homelessness. But I don't agree. I go back to the Great Depression when we had, not as today, looking at going to, I think it's 8.1% unemployment nationwide now. We're going to go to at least 10 or 11. But that's still much less than the 25% we had in the Great Depression. And during those horrible times back then in the 30s, and there are some people my age who can remember, something came out of that called Social Security. If we had never been in the depths of the Depression, we would have today no Social Security. And I think likewise, because of where we are, there's more attention focused on homelessness than otherwise there would be. And one sign is that the new administration is so involved in mentioning, talking about, and doing something about homelessness. President Obama, in a lot of his campaign speeches, and now since elected, often mentions homelessness. He asks for volunteers for homeless shelters. And in the stimulus package, we actually have more monies being directed to fight homelessness and prevent homelessness than we've had in recent years. Up until this point in time, there's been in the history of the country only one piece of legislation specifically designed to combat homelessness. That's the McKinty-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, which was enacted in 1987. It was enacted through a groundswell of support in both houses. It was bipartisan. It was reluctantly signed by President Reagan in 1987. Since then, there have been ups and downs. Sometimes it's been decreased and increased until today. Now we have a definite move on.